The single greatest threat to the American economy was never artificial intelligence. It wasn't China, and it wasn't whoever's occupying the White House. It's something so painfully boring that your eyes would glaze over if you saw it in a headline. And that's exactly the problem, because nobody's watching it. If you've spent the last year confused about why mortgage rates won't budge, why the stock market keeps having random panic attacks, and why the Fed can talk about easing all day long while everything still feels financially suffocating, the explanation doesn't live in Washington. It lives in Tokyo. Specifically, it lives inside the most mind-numbingly dull financial instrument ever created, Japanese government bonds. Because the nation best known for exporting anime to American weebs has also been quietly functioning as the structural support beam underneath the entire global financial system for 3 decades straight. And that beam is starting to crack. But none of this makes sense unless you rewind to 1992, because that's when Japan's legendary asset bubble detonated. Property values disintegrated, the stock market collapsed, and Japan drifted into what economists eventually labeled the lost decades. 30 years of economic flatline, no real growth, no inflation, wages going absolutely nowhere. The entire economy just went coma mode, and nobody could figure out how to wake it up. So the Bank of Japan reached for the only playbook central banks have when nothing else works. They pushed rates to zero. Then they pushed rates negative. And when even that failed to move the needle, they invented something called yield curve control. It sounds like a weapon system, but all it really means is we're going to physically force long-term bond yields to stay low regardless of what markets think about it. Japan essentially took interest rates and bolted them to the ground. The result? For decades, Japanese government bonds returned almost nothing, and that put Japanese investors in an impossible position. Think about it. You're running a pension fund in Tokyo. You're managing an insurance portfolio. You've got $1 billion that needs to generate returns, and your own country's bonds are offering you essentially 0%. You've got two moves: sit there and earn nothing, or go find yield somewhere else on the planet. They went shopping. What unfolded was a decades-long capital exodus that turned Japan into the single largest foreign holder of American treasuries, a dominant buyer of U.S. mortgage-backed securities, and the world's biggest net creditor nation. Translation: Japan quietly became the globe's cash machine, not because they had some patriotic desire to fund America's spending habits, simply because the arithmetic was irresistible. Here's the mechanics. Say hello to Bob. Bob wants investment returns, so Bob walks into the Japanese debt markets and borrows yen at practically zero cost. He converts those yen into US dollars and parks them in treasuries paying 4%. After accounting for hedging and transaction costs, he pockets the gap. That's the yen carry trade in its simplest form. Borrow cheap in Japan, deploy expensive everywhere else. And when your borrowing cost is effectively free, treasuries are just the starting point. You branch into equities, you load up on commercial real estate, you wade into emerging market debt. Anything with a yield above zero becomes a target. This one trade, repeated at massive institutional scale, became one of the single largest engines of global liquidity for an entire generation. At its peak, estimates from major banks put the yen carry trade somewhere in the trillions. Global capital markets were essentially powered by a Japanese subsidy that nobody voted for and most people didn't even know existed. But the whole thing balanced on one assumption, one pillar: Japanese rates would stay anchored near zero indefinitely. In 2024, that pillar snapped. The Bank of Japan formally abandoned yield curve control. They hiked interest rates for the first time in 17 years. Then they hiked again. The reaction was immediate and violent. The S&P 500 shed 6%. Japan's Nikkei 225 cratered more than 12% in a single trading session, its most brutal day since 1987. The message from markets was loud and clear. This changes everything, because rising Japanese yields trigger two simultaneous problems. Borrowing in yen suddenly costs real money, and hedging the currency exposure on all those overseas investments gets dramatically more expensive too. The free lunch disappears overnight. That 4% treasury Bob was chasing, after updated borrowing and hedging costs, the margin evaporates. And when the math stops working, the behavior changes. Capital that spent 30 years flowing out of Japan starts reversing course, heading home. This process, called repatriation, is quietly becoming one of the most significant forces reshaping global markets. Because the uncomfortable truth investors are now confronting is straightforward. The cheapest funding source on Earth for the past 30 years just got expensive. Now, here's where it lands on your doorstep. Japan wasn't some casual participant in the US bond market. They were one of the most reliable, price-insensitive buyers of long-duration American debt for an entire generation. And the yields on that long-duration debt, Jerome Powell doesn't set those. The Fed controls the short end of the curve, the overnight lending rate. But the 10-year, the 20-year, the 30-year, those are governed by who's buying and how much supply is hitting the market. Almost everyone is focused on the wrong variable. Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater, and arguably the most influential macro investor alive, has been explicit about this. He says the bond market is the foundation beneath every other market. It's the baseline rate that dictates what returns look like across every asset class. And when the supply-demand balance in bonds deteriorates, a very specific pattern plays out. Long rates climb relative to short rates, the currency weakens, gold rallies, capital rotates out of bonds because the equilibrium is broken. And that dynamic puts central banks in a corner they can't maneuver out of. So while the entire financial media ecosystem is parsing every syllable out of Jerome Powell's mouth like it's encrypted scripture, they're watching the wrong part of the curve. The Fed's direct lever is the overnight rate, the short end of the curve. The long end responds to buyers and sellers. And the United States is issuing over $1 trillion in new debt every single year just to cover existing obligations. At that volume, even a marginal pullback in demand becomes a structural problem because all that new supply has to land somewhere. Someone has to absorb it. For decades, Japan was a cornerstone of that absorption. So what happens when one of the largest historical buyers of American long-term debt starts stepping away? Yields have to rise to find new takers. That's the basic mechanics of supply and demand playing out in real time. And that's precisely how you end up in a scenario where the Fed is actively cutting its policy rate, the short end of the curve, but the long end stays stubbornly elevated. That divergence is called a steepening yield curve. And when long-term rates refuse to cooperate, this stops being a niche bond market story. It becomes an everything story. Start with equities. Every valuation model on Wall Street discounts future earnings using long-term rates as the baseline. When those rates stay elevated, the present value of future cash flows shrinks mechanically. Price-to-earnings multiples compress. So even if a company is posting record profits, the price the market is willing to pay for those profits drops. That's how you get a stock market that feels fragile, even when corporate earnings look perfectly healthy. Now look at housing. The 10-year Treasury yield isn't some abstract figure trapped inside a Bloomberg terminal. It's the anchor point for mortgage rates across the country. When the 10-year doesn't meaningfully decline, mortgage rates don't drift back to 3%, no matter how many times the Fed cuts its own rate. Housing affordability stays crushed. Refinancing stays frozen. Transaction volume stalls out. And then there's corporate credit. Remember 2020, 2021? Capital was practically free. Interest rates were on the floor and companies were loading up on cheap debt like it was a clearance sale. When financing is that accessible, deal activity surges, valuations inflate, and the entire corporate ecosystem runs hot. Credit is the circulatory system of the business world, but when borrowing costs stay elevated for an extended period, the opposite kicks in. Risk appetite contracts, expansion slows, capital dries up. And this is the fundamental point of everything I'm laying out. For 30 decades, the United States sat on the receiving end of the largest carry trade in financial history, trillions in cheap Japanese capital flowing into American assets, suppressing yields, inflating valuations, and lubricating the entire financial machine. That era is ending, And like Dalio said, the bond market is the backbone. What we're witnessing right now is a concrete, measurable force restructuring the foundation that backbone sits on. And there's a very clear reason mainstream financial media isn't covering this. It doesn't generate engagement. It wouldn't trend. Nobody's clicking on a thumbnail about Japanese institutional capital reallocation. That demands patience, context, and an attention span longer than a doom scroll allows. People want inflation drama. They want AI narratives. They want whatever NVIDIA announced this week. They want the stories that are loud, visible, and algorithmically optimized. So the narrative gets compressed into something uselessly simple. The Fed cuts rates, conditions ease, problem solved. Except that's not how any of this actually works. That's the fiction being circulated, that a single rate cut solves structural problems, that liquidity is some automatic feature of the system, that there will always be a willing buyer for American debt at any price. But what happens when there isn't? What happens when the largest foreign holder of U.S. treasuries decides the math no longer justifies showing up? Global liquidity contracts, and liquidity is oxygen for financial markets. When it thins out, the cost of capital shifts everywhere, simultaneously. Equities, housing, corporate debt, consumer credit. Everything I've walked through connects back to this single dynamic. That's why this channel exists, to surface the forces that actually move markets, the ones legacy media won't touch because they don't perform well in an algorithm. So if understanding what's really happening beneath the surface matters to you, subscribe and hit the notification bell, because I'm going to keep covering the stories that traditional finance media won't. The loudest risks in markets are almost always already priced in. The dangerous ones are the quiet ones.